Hey, everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Integrated Man Project podcast. Before we jump into this week's episode, I did want to share about an exclusive membership I'm going to be launching to help shape the Integrated Man Project community. If this is something you'd be interested in, where you will be co laboring with me, sharing your ideas, giving input, giving me feedback, part of kind of this process of creating something bigger and better for all men, I would love for you to join. And if this is something you're interested, please reach out to me. Email me at integratedmanproject@gmail.com. You could also send me a direct message on Instagram as well or on LinkedIn. I would love for you to reach out to me. I would love for you to be part of this exclusive group to help, again, shape and form this Integrated Man community. Because as you do this, as we share in this journey together, we're going to create a community of men around the world where we become more grounded, more adaptable, more resilient, and more authentic men. So come on and join. If you're interested in this, please reach out to me. And without further ado, let's get into this week's episode. Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the Integrated Man Project podcast. I'm really excited to have this guest on. And in fact, just talking with him in the green room, virtual green room, just a moment ago, I'm even more excited because I've known him from observing his work on Instagram, and I've been following his stuff and been wanting to meet with him for a while now, given some of the concepts and topics he's talking about mental wellness is something he talks about. He's a physical fitness guru, expert, I would say, given his life, but he sprinkles in this other part of being holistically healthy, and that's part of why I want him on. And also having some conversations with him, he just seemed like a really easy talk to guy, and I'm like, hey, this is great. So before we jump into the topic, I would love for everyone to say hi to Marcus and have Marcus say hi and introduce himself.
Thanks for that introduction alone,
Yeah.
Travis, and I appreciate being on. And like you said, this little chat we had before we hit the record button was got me more excited for this podcast than I even was coming in. So I think it's important to kind of give the audience a context of my sort of history as a
Yeah.
physical fitness or a health and fitness coach, which goes back. Now I'm kind of coming into my 15th year as a professional. I have like a 25-year history of training and sort of like self-exploration, self-education. I've gone through formal education as a coach, a number of different avenues within the health and fitness world. Most, very experienced coaches, they get their start and their study starts with themselves. It's like
Mm.
I'm a 13-year-old kid who wants to go and build muscle and goes to the local gym, and this was in 25 years ago. So 1999 is my first time in Gold's Gym and near my hometown.
Mm.
And the resources that we had access to learn were magazines, the bigger, stronger guy at the gym.
Yeah.
It's kind of like this mystery black box of like, well, what do you do in fitness? And you're
Mm.
reading muscle magazines and you're reading things that generally are from people that at the time I didn't realize it's like very enhanced athletes, and people that don't really represent what I was chasing and who I was. So it's like a hard journey in the first few years to really have access to good information as compared to today, where I see myself and I can accept that I am an educator to a lot of individuals out there who didn't have, who otherwise might not have access to good information. Like I didn't have access to good information when I was a teenager trying to learn how to lift weights, to put on muscle in a smart, intelligent way that would last me my life, with
Mm-hmm.
good nutrition, good training principles, and good lifestyle practices.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of been this long journey of, self experimentation, formal education, experience as a athlete, as a coach, going through a lot of different styles of fitness, and then honoring that I am the person that I wish I could have looked up on Instagram when I was
Mm.
13 and trying to lift weights, and to become this man that I wanted to become.
Yeah.
And so now, it's not that I just speak to a male audience. I have a female audience, but to me, it's like, what is something that I would say to my younger self?
Mm.
Is what I'm sharing right now of value to that younger
Mm.
person? And even when it's topics that are around, being an adult, being a father, being in relationships, like handling adult life stresses, I still try and think about it through the context of like, how would I have integrated this into who I am
Mm.
as a younger man so that, I would be more well equipped to handle some of the challenges and things that I couldn't have foreseen in the future. But that's me. I'm a health and fitness coach who in 2000 left like a traditional allopathic medical school, dropped out to go and pursue a health and fitness career, and that was training people one on one. And in
Mm.
2010, 11, Instagram kind of took off, and I became somebody who was, in the last 12 years, I went from somebody who was like, my life is going to be training people in person and opening up a gym,
Mm.
to, whoa, I can broadcast my message globally through social media, and people resonate with it and they want my support, and this is
Mm.
how I can support, this is what I can do to support them.
Yeah. Instagram. It's funny. Instagram. I don't think I was on Instagram back then. I think I was I think I was, but I wasn't really doing anything with it. I think back then, because back then it
Yeah.
was just a photo only platform, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
It was just like just
I think
photos.
I started uploading videos in like 2012, 2013,
Yeah.
that were like just my training journey. And
Okay.
because I was competing in CrossFit sport on the international kind of stage, and so I had people that were interested, like, hey, could you imagine like if LeBron James was like posting Instagram videos of his workouts every day, or like,
Oh, it would have blown up. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that was the kind of thing I was doing at the time. Not that I had any, star power like that, but I mean,
Mm.
people who followed the sport wanted to know, what are the best people in the sport doing? And
Yeah.
that's what I was doing.
Yeah. And at the time, you were one of the elite CrossFit athletes back, and that was back in 2010 when that was kind of your peak at
20
the.
2010 to 2016, that was my career. And so
Okay.
peak years were, in the final years before I retired.
Okay. And I'm curious, what shifted you from more traditional medicine, formal education to like more the coaching? Because it seems like there was a decision point. Like, I'd rather do this, and something shifted in there from like more traditional to this.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like in the context of this integrated man, project. I had like an integrated health mindset going into medical school.
Mm.
So the form, the formal process of applying to US medical schools is, obviously undergraduate prerequisites, grades, MCAT scores, and then personal statement. Personal statement, the prompt is, why do you want to be a doctor, essentially?
Yeah.
And so my personal statement was, I want to integrate many aspects of health inside of whatever practice I have as a MD.
Yeah.
I want to integrate nutrition, mental health, movement, traditional diagnostic, a symptom based approach to medicine, to, basically have access to sick people
Yeah.
and be able, like, I can manage their symptoms effectively enough so that they can engage in a healthy behavioral
Mm.
approach to getting well. So
Yeah.
that was me going in. And then when I got in, it was, we were on I think medicine was on the cusp of having, obviously this was 2008, I matriculated into medical school. So,
Hmm.
14 years ago, 16 years ago, there was not, functional medicine or, traditional docs who were, standing up on their soapboxes and talking about diet and movement,
Mm.
like the Peter Attias of the world were
Mm.
not there at the time in as big a way. So it was
Right.
kind of like we were still in that paradigm of, we're basically just kind of treating illnesses with
Yeah.
symptom management.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn, this is going to be super hard. Like, I don't really there's not
Yeah.
mentors, there's not an environment that feels inspiring and motivating to keep pushing this.
Yeah.
And it's so hard and demanding. And I
Mm.
was losing a part of myself in that process, that I just was like, all I see for the next 8 years of my medical education is me slowly losing my vision, conforming to the model. And I just didn't want that at the time. Like, I really saw a life for myself that was one of, you know, chasing what I truly desire, not
Hmm.
just like accepting that this is the way and I'm just going to do it because I know I can do it well. Like, I can do it, you know, quote unquote, like I can get good grades, like I can be at the
Right.
top of this, like I know how to study, I know how to do the thing, but it just felt empty. So that was where
Mm,
I was like, it was just a risk. It was a scary time because I was like,
mm,
I just can't see myself doing this thing. I got to make a change, and I'm very grateful I did. But
mm.
it was like, it was like the dark. It was like, it was a traumatic time of my life, the very dark period of like, what have I done?
So, like, a lot of doubt, a lot of fear, a lot of, like, that kinda
Oh
stuff?
gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm,
doubt, fear, and then ultimately it drove this like obsession of
mm,
like I must succeed at this because I've carried this label as like a very successful, student, person, athlete. I always do the best. I was in the medical I was like, in terms of like the academic route that I took and really which like at the time like these were like measures of success as like a
right.
late teen, early
Yeah.
adult. It's like you're in graduate school, you're in medical school, you are the top of your
Yeah.
class, you are all the good things. And I was like, that's not enough for me. And I
Uh,
have to go and find that now in an industry where the path to do that was completely unpaved,
yeah.
albeit but by like maybe two or three like world renowned strength coaches who were coaching Olympians. And I was like, I'm not going to be that person. Like, what am I going to do
Right.
to reestablish that you know, this was an all just a mistake and in a waste of time.
Yeah. And wonder if you could speak more to a couple things that stood out to me as you were talking a bit about that too. The idea of success, like I'm successful, like I'm in this place of that's one thing that like I want to hear more about. And then also you said it turned into an obsession. So can you speak more about like quickly on that? How did you come up with the initial definition of success at that time? Was that from upbringing, parents, like
Yeah.
society, just your own self? Like kind of what was that from?
Yeah, it was my upbringing. It was
Hmm.
like I showed a early on to have I showed I was demonstrating to people that I was, exceptional in a few things,
Hmm.
mainly academics and sport, which are two things that generally get a lot of praise. And it's like, hey, you got great
Yeah.
grades
Especially
and
as
you're
guys, I think, right? Sports
yeah.
and yeah, sports and
Mhm.
grades, yeah.
And they were things that I didn't just do because like I felt pressure. It's like I just
Yeah,
generally loved it.
sure.
I loved the sport. I thought some of the stuff in school came easy, but I was just interested in doing well. And so as that sort of gets as I'm getting praise and adoration for what was coming somewhat naturally to me, it
Mm,
became this sort of like, oh, I am seen by all these people for doing this well. If I do more well, if I do even better, like maybe there's then I get more, and then it's like that positive reinforcement. Like
yep.
you're such a good student, you're such a good athlete, you're going to be such a great doctor, like your dad someday. You're going to do these,
Ah,
and I'm like, okay, yeah, like you're right, and this is kind of how people know me. This is
ah,
how I get loved, or and
okay.
I'm enough as a person when
Uh,
I'm doing these things,
yeah.
and so success that's how success kind of gets defined early on for me.
Mhm.
And then I just start it morphs into an anxiety where it's like, oh, if I don't do the thing, then I
Uh,
might not get this.
hmm,
And not that anybody ever withheld love from me because I got a bad grade, or that I didn't win the thing, but I created my own story around that.
mm,
And then that just sort of as I described this recently to somebody, was like, as a young kid, it took this much effort to accomplish those things. And
mm,
then in junior high and then in high school, it took more effort to be exceptional. And then in
mm,
college, it took even more. I mean, it took a seismic jump in college where now I'm at UC Berkeley and I'm around the best athletes and
mm,
the best students and the most hardworking people, you
mm,
know, in their teenage, early 20s years. And how do I stand out from that group? I have to do that much more. And so it became this like, oh my gosh, I have to push myself so hard to
yeah,
be to achieve the level of success that
yeah,
I have now told myself is necessary.
yeah,
And without it, perhaps life looks very miserable and I'm scared to not have that. So
mm,
I'll do whatever it takes. And it was in college that it shifted from like, I'll do whatever it takes, made me more miserable than
uh,
than the actual outcome of not getting it, like
yeah,
of getting the success. And it was like a very big shift in my whole life right then, was like,
mm,
oh my gosh, like I'm afraid of not having success and how bad that'll feel, but
Hmm.
the pursuit of that success feels incredibly
Heavy.
hard and heavy.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no good option here.
Hmm.
And
Seems like a lose-lose almost
it was
like
a big lose-lose, and it
yeah.
led to me taking, what I my gap years after college before
Mm.
medical school, which I refound and reconnected with, like, a part of me that I was like, "I like this person. Oh my
Hmm.
god, like, there's a life where I matter, that I don't have to have all this,
Yeah.
objective success, or
Yeah.
whatever I called it." And it kinda, like, recharged me and motivated me again, and then I was like, "Okay, I'm ready to go back to medical school." And once I got back in, just, like, all the same cycles and
Uh,
patterns of college came back, and it was like,
you like
whoa.
fell right back in, it
Oh,
sounds
I
like
just,
kinda.
yeah, I fell back in quickly, and I was like, I got to go a different path. And so the new path was fitness, which just filled me up with so much. And I was starting from the bottom. I was starting
Mm.
from nothing,
Yeah.
and that felt good. And it felt, and I happened to surround myself in an environment where I was going to excel. Like, I was around the right people. I was doing
Mm.
something I loved. I had unknowingly built, like, years of experience,
Mm.
both as a student, a student of science, of physiology,
Mm.
of, at that point, 10 years of hard training and application.
Yeah.
And now people wanted to listen to me to get
Mm.
themselves into shape. And I was like, oh, I'm right where I need to be, and I can do really a lot of good here. And I
Yeah.
had this, like, immediate feedback loop of, like, this feels amazing. And it was just like, okay, now we're going and we're on the right path. And that's where it became kind of this obsession too, of, like, going to prove that I could do this thing
Mm.
that I was on the path to do in a more conventional way, in a new way. And
Huh.
yeah, it's like I said, it's been 15 years since that started.
Yeah. Well, and then I'm wondering, it's amazing how powerful a motivator our stories that we tell ourselves. That's the thing that was sticking out as you're talking, and something I hear, oh gosh, probably easily over 1,000 times with men and women that I've worked with in my therapeutic office. That the narrative we tell ourselves, how powerful it can be, whether it was explicitly told to us of, hey, you must, in order to be loved and have value, you must get that A, right? Because some people I've worked with were very explicitly told that kind of messaging,
Yeah,
like
no,
very explicitly.
yeah.
Others, it was
And
more
just to be clear, because if my mom's listening to this,
yeah,
I was not told that. Like, that
yeah,
was not what they were feeding me.
right.
I created that story, but I do understand that for
Yeah.
people.
Well, and that's the thing I was getting at, that even when it's not an explicit message, that we can still generate our own perception or perceived perception and story, and how powerful that internally can be for us. Like, what a powerful one, in one hand, a motivator. Okay, I think it motivates you to succeed. In one hand,
Sure.
like, it's a double-edged sword. I think there's a powerful motivator, like, well, I better succeed, then I better keep performing and moving, and you did. But then
Mhm.
the dark side, like you said, is, well, then what happens if I don't? Then what, right? And then that feels awful. Like you said, the lose-lose is like, well, that, because the fear, even though it wasn't told you, even though parents, it sounds like your parents were very, like, probably clear with that messaging, for
Mhm.
whatever reason, that you interpreted it, and that part of you bought into, well, actually, if I don't, then this is probably the outcome.
Yeah.
And then how you stepped away, and then you felt sounds like some significant relief in that gap year of,
Oh
like,
gosh, yeah.
"Oh, this is nice, and I don't have to feel like I have to perform." Like, again, nothing wrong with performing, nothing wrong with getting A's, like, that's fine. But it's that drive, that fear-based system of, like, almost like an anxiousness, stress state internally, that's like, you have to do this, otherwise this thing will happen,
Yeah.
this other reality that hasn't happened
Mhm.
will.
Yeah, there's,
And
like, a quote that, like, or I listened to, the Diary of a CEO podcast with
Mm,
Stephen Bartlett, and he likes to he uses a saying like, "Are you being dragged, or are you being driven by
mm,
something?" And it was like, I was being dragged along by this, like, fear and anxiety.
mhm.
And I think when I shifted into the health and fitness field, it was like, whoa, this is what
Mm.
it feels like to be driven, to
Ah,
really succeed. Like, my anxiety quieted down around my performance and my outcomes a lot, as
hmm,
during that phase of life. So it was just, you know, it was like, it didn't take long for me to be like, this is right.
mm.
This feels right.
So that you've something, and you felt this internal shift, it
Yes.
sounds like, of, "Oh, yeah, this is driven, not dragged." Mm.
Yeah, and we might get to this part of the story too, but just to actually fast forward, like, all the
Yeah,
way to present,
sure, let's do it.
it's interesting that, like,
Let's
this
just go
thing
there.
that yeah, this thing that I'm like, okay, in 2009, I
Mm,
joined a coaching staff at a gym in my kind of county where I, grew up, and it wasn't but a couple, it was probably in the first week of doing the job that I was like, "This is it. This is like, it
mm,
feels right." And people will say like, "Oh, you found your passion, you found your, your purpose, like what you want to do." And
mm,
I'm in the same industry. It's taken different forms and shapes, and the delivery of what I do is through a different medium now, mostly digital. But 13 years later, I found myself in the same industry that I was driven by and passionate about, feeling, oh my God, I'm being dragged along by fear and anxiety, and
mm,
right, in just a different context, in a different phase of life, a season of life where now I have kids, I have greater responsibilities, we have a mortgage. I feel like there's a lot of weight on me.
yeah.
If I don't succeed, then life's going to fall apart. It's going to be scary, but like the path and the pursuit of success is so, it's just like it's weighing on me so heavily that I was kind
Mm,
of in this like, dude, I'm back to like there's no good option and it all
uh,
feels like shit.
mm,
And that was a hard moment to like come face to face with, be like, damn it, what did
yeah.
I 14 years of this, the first 7 or 8 were just this beautiful ride, and then the
Mm,
last 5 or 6 have been this kind of turbulent, and more recently this like downward trend.
mm,
And like, what did I like, that was the, okay, let me step back and be like, what have I not hell where in the integrated man, integrated human, integrated
mm,
health paradigm did I have I been what have I been missing?
mm.
And this is like what my last 6 months have
Have
been very,
okay.
very profoundly about.
Well, I'm wondering if you could speak more to, you said this in this past 6 months, and I'm glad we flashed, it's good to have context and kind of bring to the present that things can reoccur and we can kind of old tapes, I call them, or old messages, we could kind of fall into them, maybe even in a new way. Even if we
Mhm,
think we've overcome something, it's, internally, it's not a big shift to fall back into some old behaviors or ways of thinking or fear based, anxiety, that it's not like even if we've overcome it, like it's often not a big step to get back into it.
mhm.
Um, and so I'm wondering a couple parts that I'd be curious to hear a bit more if you feel comfortable sharing is, was there any before you stepped back and said, "Hey, let me examine and like, you know, get a better picture of my life of what's, is being integrated, what's missing, what am I lacking, or maybe where am I not investing in or being intentional about my life?" Was it easy for you to kind of have this awareness, okay, let me step back and go, or was there some like things occurring in your life that kind of were maybe some warning signs or some flags of like, oh, I think I need to pay attention to this? Or was it kind of, did you avoid stepping back? I'm just kind of curious that little process for you.
Yeah, it's somewhere between it's been easy and it's been, a little bit challenging to be able to take that step back and get perspective.
Hmm.
The part that's made it easy is that I have had a commitment to, personal growth and through like, traditional talk therapy for a long time. I'm
Hmm.
I'm I'm my wife's a psychologist. She and I have been seeing a couples therapist for, now we're coming up on this is like our 10th year that we've
Hmm.
been doing this, and we've only been married for 7 year or 8 years. So
Hmm.
we started therapy, when we basically were like, hey, I think we might be going down this path of like a
Hmm.
life together,
Hmm.
maybe kids in the future. Let's
Yeah.
establish some really good, a foundation for our marriage or a
Smart.
potential marriage. So I have this like partner who's with me along this journey, and I'm with her,
Hmm.
and we can we're here to support, like, and be mirrors for one another, like, hey, this doesn't seem like it's working for you.
Hmm.
Also in like personal therapy, so having somebody that on a biweekly basis I get to explore myself with a bit.
Yeah.
And then I have a men's group, or my two best friends, who during the pandemic we decided, you know what, we're gonna make a standing call, like, that we get on every week or every other week, and we just make sure that we're supporting each other through whatever's happening.
Hmm.
So I've had these resources and these outlets, which, when things are good, it's like easy to like take for granted, like, hey, I've got this. And then when things get hard and challenging, it's like, oh wow, like I've got
Hmm.
this amazing network. And so I kind of
Yeah.
was I've always had this, my story, or the old pattern story for me is like slipping into this anxiety, depression
Mm.
when when I'm feeling like dragged to accomplish this, very self established metric of success, right?
Mhm.
And that has kind of like, I think, becoming a parent and seeing and kind of adopting some of the stories of my own father, like, this is how you provide, this is what you need to do, this is what I need to be as a provider, as a husband, as a
Mm.
father. And choosing to live in an affluent area, an expensive area, and just in
Yeah.
a in an industry that is complex and difficult, like, and owning my own business. All of these things just started to stack up over the last several years.
Yeah.
And so it was like this slow, like,
Mm.
drain. And when things are happening slowly, it's hard to like feel like, oh, I just crossed a threshold that was like different. It was like,
Yeah.
is this different, or am I just feeling this? In enough time had passed where it was like, yeah, you know what, like, I'm not happy most days, or
Mm.
I'm actually going to bed with like a, a reasonable amount of anxiety and fear most
Mm.
nights of the week. And I'm like, I just
Yeah.
don't want to, I don't want to be living like that.
Yeah. Well, and thanks for sharing that, because I think in some sense you've already been on a journey of having support and guys you're talking with, and a community of, and being engaged in therapy. I mean, on in a couple setting as well as individual setting, and then your guys, like, sounds like you had a really good just awareness of, I need support. And a lot of men I've worked with don't have that kind of, all the way from nothing, they're alone, completely alone, to kind of like where you are, and anywhere in
Right.
between. And even
I
with
think
that,
with more people on the alone side, like that is
Mhm.
that is much more common, where they've zero,
Yeah.
and on top of that, they feel shame, or like it's not even an avenue that they could pursue. Like they can't ask for help. They shouldn't. They're not supposed
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, and I think that's probably more what I'll see is that on that rare will I see men in my office. And I do, I think it is, but it's not the norm. It's, rare will I see a guy coming in who has a really good support guys are talking to, being open with. They've done therapy before. That's more on the outskirts than it is common. It's usually they're coming in, they're either because their wife told them to come in, or partner, or they're just like super, something got them in.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't even want to be there. It's like they're coming usually in some kind of crisis or something. But hearing your story, I think, is also, I think, a great picture in one hand of like how change can happen. It's slow, where you don't even recognize it until eventually it kind of hits you. You're like, I'm having this awareness that I'm going to bed more frequently, stressed and anxious and overwhelmed and down and low, whatever it is internally. And you had enough insight and awareness to be like, yeah, I should probably talk about this with people I'm
Yeah.
already talking to. And I'm quickly, I didn't ask this question, but initially going to therapy for the first time, was that like an easy sell for you? Was that kind of like, yeah, got it, I'm in? Or was there some like apprehension, or why should I talk to someone, or what initially brought you in? Was that
Yeah.
anxiety back then, and the fear, or?
Yeah, I mean, my first therapy, like the first therapist I ever went to see, or the early days of it for me were, it was more of like, I was just, it was in college, and I was
Mm,
just like really, I was just really struggling towards the end of college with like, man, the whole prospects like that I'm looking at, like, beyond college, just look terrible. Like,
mm,
I'm gonna go from one thing to the next that just feels like a total drain, and like, again, being dragged along. And I remember being quite open to it, because I think my brother had been through therapy, and he had had a
okay,
really like powerful experience with a therapist. He didn't go out of, like, he went because he had to go. He was having like, challenges in school, was
okay,
like, you know, using substances, was
mm-hmm,
like, and it was like, I'll go to therapy if like you just let me stay in school, mom and dad,
mm,
kind of
mm,
thing.
yeah,
So, but he then had a great experience, and I was like, oh, well, this could be all right. And it was like really something my parents supported a lot. But then I would say, it was then I was in individual therapy for probably in my early 20s,
mm,
then stopped because my therapist retired, and
mm,
I was like, I felt like I was in a stable place. I didn't need to go back in. And then met my wife, girlfriend at the time. We started, therapy together. That was a
mm,
great foundation, but it had a different focus and purpose. And it wasn't like individual therapy, but it was like 5 years ago that I just hit like I had
mm,
like a big surge of kind of panic and overwhelm. It was like a very acute
mm,
phase of anxiety that it was like year 1 of like being a parent,
Oh,
underslept,
yeah.
our firstborn had colic. It was like
Yep.
I was just and my business was kind of growing at a really
Mm,
rapid pace, and then had sort of its first like business plateau, and I don't know, it was all too much. So that was what drove me to like be like, okay, I'll engage again. And
mm,
it wasn't like, oh, I'm so eager to get back into therapy. It was like, even then, with somebody who had had experience with it, positive experience, my wife was like, I really think you should just like, I think you got to talk to somebody. This is like not something you can navigate on your own.
mm,
And so that's what got me back in. And I was resistant, at the time too. I was like, I mean, a little bit more to this story is like this same therapist who I've been with for 5 years. I would say just like 3 sessions ago, we had like a major breakthrough in our relationship. And like, I
mm,
felt like, wow, like I've overcome some like maybe underlying trust or issue that I even have had like in these
mm.
past 5 years. Like,
Wow.
I've held on to tried to hold on to some control and not been like fully able
Mm.
to, and which was huge. And then oddly enough, like the next session with him, it's like, okay, and I'm officially retiring in, you know, a month. So it's
Oh.
like, okay, wow, like look at this. Like,
Wow.
but I'm very, it's like tons of mostly just gratitude. Like, wow, I got to this place with
Mm.
this new relationship, and it's really, it's certainly changed so much for me in my life, and my relationship to my wife, and just where I'm at today.
Yeah. And you could totally say no to this, but I'm wondering what was that I guess what was that thing of you said control, like there's something that I'm not letting what can you say what that might have been and what was that control about?
I think it's just like this. I think there's, the story that I have is like, and this has been uncovered a lot in the last year for me, is I'm supposed to know how to do so many things.
Mm.
I'm a man, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a business owner. I have all these hats that I'm supposed to know how to do these things right. It's
Mm.
shown up in every place in my life, and to really surrender and just be like, I have no I have no idea. I don't
Mm.
know.
Yeah.
And I'm like open to whatever comes. It's like I've shed a lot of that, but I've always held on to some, where it's
Mm.
like I think it scares me to like really be in like full surrender of like, I don't know, I'm here, you're my guide, like just teach me. I'm open to anything. I'm
Yeah.
open to being completely wrong,
Yeah.
because if I'm wrong, it brings up the voice of like, you're not you're not a good
Mm.
man, or
Yeah.
you didn't, you failed, right?
Oh,
And
yeah, yeah.
so that's the thing that I've kind of like protected in myself, is like I got to hold on to some control
Mm.
around knowing these things. and
Yeah, because that
and then
part of you was saying essentially, because if you don't, like that part, even if it was a small part, it had a lot of power, that part saying, well,
yeah,
because if you do, Marcus, if you do admit this, right, it's going to say that you are really not enough and you're failing as a dad, as a
yeah,
man. Because even though part of you is like, that's not true, there's this other part that's like,
right,
yeah, but you got to hold on to this because if you really let all this go, then that will happen. So that part was in a way protecting you from that message, quote unquote,
yeah.
becoming true. Yeah.
This is the first time I'm like saying this like publicly, but I feel like it just so makes so much sense. Is that I did a psychedelic assisted therapy session last year,
Hmm.
and the the biggest like what came through in that experience
Mm,
was this concept of like, Marcus, looking at your younger self, seeing me through all of my phases of life,
mm,
recognizing a theme of like, this poor kid thought he had to know everything,
mm,
and guess what, little buddy? It's okay.
mm.
You don't have to know anything. You
Yeah.
didn't have to know how to do it right. You don't have to know how to, it's okay that you didn't know. And
Mm,
I like it, like brings up tears, because I'm like,
yeah.
I felt like I had to know everything,
Mm,
and it caused me so much pain throughout my
uh,
life. And it's still in there. And I
yeah.
have to keep reminding that little kid of like, it's okay not to know.
Mm,
Like, and it showed up in relationships. It showed up in my, sexuality. It showed up in my academic pursuits. It showed up in my career. It shows up as me being a dad. It's like, you're supposed to know how to do all these things. You're
yeah.
supposed to know as a young man how to, please a woman
Mm,
sexually. Like, you should know that. It's like,
yeah.
should I? Like, I have no fucking idea. I'm scared that I don't
Yeah.
know. And then it's
Yeah.
like, hey, you're a business owner. You've got 10 employees. You need to know how to run this business. Like,
Mm,
what do you think you're doing if you don't, if you, I'm like, I
mm,
don't know. Like, I didn't go to business school. Like I'm lost on some of this stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I'm a parent. Like, you're supposed to know how to parent your kid. Oh, you fucked that up. Like,
Yeah.
oh, you should have. Like, it's just this
Yeah.
relentless thing that's there for me. I felt, and then I'm like sharing this with people. I'm like, oh my god,
Hmm.
we're all thinking this. All these men are thinking the same thing. It's like,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
is so devastating. And yeah, it really is something that isn't talked about enough.
Yeah, and I appreciate your strength and vulnerability just to share that. I think, we need seeing this is just really a sign of, one way men can show, again, strength and vulnerability. That, hey, first I'm talking about it, so I just feel honored that you even shared it with me, and I will. I mean, I've had that thought at times, absolutely, for sure,
Mhm.
and I've had the same thought where I'm like, I'm a trained therapist. I should know this with my kids or my wife. Like, why did I should know not to do that. I teach
Mhm.
people this all day long.
Mhm.
And that
Yeah.
voice will come up and shame will come and, the failure stuff. Even to this day, it's just it's amazing that how powerful that voice can be
Oh, yeah.
and how many men and women too, but we're talking to men here, but definitely women, but men, how most men are struggling to some degree. There's some type of voice that they're having a battle, some type of belief that can creep in at the right time, subtly, where we kind of begin to buy into its messaging and its voice,
Mhm.
and how powerful that grip can be on our soul, our how we think about ourselves, how we act and behave.
Yeah.
And when I hear this too, the power of safe community to actually put it out in the light, right? Like reveal it to these other guys saying, "Hey, so it's not hidden." And
Yeah.
I think of like all Brene Brown's work and stuff, and she's not the first to talk about shame, but she's been popularized by her research. But obviously, the shame of like hiding and how shame continue and perpetuates is in the dark, right? When we hide it in the recess and don't share it with people or reveal it, right? And
Yeah.
so it just continues to grow and it gets stronger and stronger. But when we actually share it in a safe community, we're able to kind of put it out there and other men or mentors will say, "Hey, dude, it's okay. Like you don't have to have it figured out." Or what you did with your psychedelic of kind of this healthy, almost like wise mentor figure was able to say to your younger self, "Hey, it's okay. Like you don't have to have this. It's okay." And what a
Mhm.
powerful,
Oh
it seems
god.
like that was such a
Yeah.
deep, deep release. And I'm curious, after following that, what was that like for you? Like, how was that voice afterwards? Did you feel like,
Yeah. Yeah, that was really it was so like within 10 days of that,
mm-hmm,
we my wife and I went to a Tony Robbins event in
mm-hmm,
Texas, Unleash the Power Within for anybody who's experienced any of that stuff. And you spend a lot of time on like, limiting beliefs and belief systems and kind of just like shedding just like the shit. And it's like,
mm-hmm,
so I'm coming in with this like fairly, you know, a big amount of awareness of me and my stories, and then this like profound heightened experience of like
mm,
seeing it, you know, in like kind of almost like a third, like a,
like a third
third person.
person? Yeah.
Yeah. And then going and then investigating it more with a lot of the tools that he uses in his events of like getting people's bodies moving and getting their like just we move a lot, we scream, we do inner work, it's a really powerful system that he's built to get you to like get in touch with those things. So
Mm,
all of it, it's like this storm is like brewing of like, oh my gosh, I'm seeing so much right now.
mm,
And but then on the other side of it was like, okay, I see these stories, I see the way I talk to myself, I see how really like damaging it is to like
mm,
my ability to connect in the moment with the people
yeah.
I care about. And it wasn't like enough for me to like suddenly make a change. It was like I was hurting. I had this like awakening or awareness,
Mm,
and then now it hurts even more because I can see myself doing
yeah.
this to myself. And so like the month that followed was like really hard. And
Because you
it
couldn't
w
not see it anymore. It was like
yeah,
so
it's like
apparent.
I'm
Yeah.
like, I can't unsee what yeah, that's how
Yeah.
I've described it. I was like, well, now it's like I just ripped off the robe and I'm like, I
Yeah.
can't unsee what I've seen. And so really it was like the end of 2023
Mm,
where I was like, I need some type of relief. And I actually went on, like a anti-anxiety, antidepressant, like I was like, I'm gonna go pharmacology, like,
mm-hmm,
which I'd been very resistant to since my early 20s when I had done my
mm,
last, exposure to like traditional antidepressants, which didn't have like a very profound impact on me.
yeah.
And 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 truthfully, it was like within 3 to 4 weeks of starting a round of medication and like titrating my dose, I was just like, holy shit, I think the
Mm.
veil of my whole life, like
Wow.
of it just got lifted. And I'm like, it was like clarity of like, whoa, all the
Hmm.
tools and all the work that I've done like has a chance of like
Being usable.
exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And I
Hmm.
call it like my second awakening of life.
Mm.
And like I felt like I re-met my wife and
Wow.
I was like in a new relationship with like this amazing person. I was like, oh my God, I have like a new girlfriend. Like this is so like I'm like, I'm here. I'm like, oh, this is parenting is fun right now. Like what
Yeah,
is
yeah.
so just like, yeah, it was like hard, really hard. And then like a lift that has just been kind of this steady climb out of
Mm.
that to now,
Yeah,
which makes me so it's like so exciting and fun to talk about it with people,
yeah.
with you, you know, and whoever ends up listening to this. It's just not. It's still new to me. It still feels very new and
Yeah.
fresh.
Yeah, no, and gosh, I really am feel honored that you shared it. And I think it just speaks to just this, and we were talking about this previously in the virtual green room, but this notion of what it means to be an integrated man, and that really is and I firmly believe this. I think to some degree we are always having to work on ourselves. Like we don't stop. There's always a level of maintenance and maintaining and growth and awareness. And it's almost like depending on the season you're in, when we were talking about seasons, how sometimes certain seasons you just kind of let go of certain parts of self, whether it's physical fitness or some part of your health, or maybe some mental stuff or spiritual or social, just because something's happened. So we all go to our normal survival states or ways of coping. And so it takes, in a way, some level of regular of assessment of becoming aware of how am I doing? Am I balanced in these areas? Am I not?
Hmm.
And something that it's a kind of a continual evolution of like we're always kind of working and moving towards something, and then kind of having to
That's right.
scan and assess like how am I actually doing right now, like do I need to rest, do I need to change, do I like what is really going on, and I think that's something that I teach all the clients I work with too, and even myself, as a reminder that we're never we don't I don't think we ever fully get there, like a destination. It's more of an
Yeah.
ongoing process of
Yeah.
are you checking in with all these things, and what are the tools you're using that are effective? What are things that are not so effective? Do you need to trade some things in to try something different? And hearing your story with the second evolution, it's like it's this kind of ebb and flow of life. And for you, you've been putting in a bit more work in kind of the internal mental wellness, mental health, psyche space of, you have the fitness down, but this other internal world was like, I need to do some work here. And on the reverse, that people didn't hear our earlier conversation, the part that I'm working on as a dad is my physical fitness right now. Is
Yeah.
like trying to get that, of integrating that in more and seeing the impact that's going to have on my mental wellness and
Yeah.
social thing, because they all parts of self, they impact one another. Like everything influences everything else. Like they're not separate. Like mind, body, and soul is interconnected, whether we want it to be or not. And so as we gain wellness and holistic health, we're going to see that it's going to benefit all the other areas. Just like if part of us is kind of neglected, that's going to have an impact. Now, varying degrees from mild to severe, depending upon what it is, on all aspects of our life. And hearing your story too about this like healing experience, and I always it's kind of that's kind of like inner child work, right? Is like
Hmm.
this positive message, and how powerful that voice can be, but it still required continued work. And now that you said I see it now, I call it the car effect. Is like once you see that car, you see it everywhere. It's like a Tesla. You see them everywhere. It's like once you see it, you're like, I thought I was the only one with this car. And like, no, everyone has this car. Like you can't not see it. Or I think of the Matrix, like you took
Yeah.
the red pill, you could take the blue one if you want to go back and have
Right.
willful blindness, but it's like, I don't want to do that. I want to grow. And look what's
Hmm.
happened now. It's like all these tools that I've been practicing for years, that all those things were important, that they got you to this point. And now you had this other experience that kind of, in a way, the veil was lifted, that all
Yeah.
those things were important parts of your healing growth journey, that without them, if you were to remove pieces, I don't know if you would be in the same place.
Well, a couple of things that just came to mind as you were just saying that. Number one is the red pill analogy from the Matrix is something I'm going to take into my relationship because, one of the things that has been great and also challenging is that there's a new depth to like my relationship to my wife in the last few months. One that is very rewarding for both of us, but particular for her. It's like,
Mm,
this is kind of what I've been wanting from our relationship and from you for so long. And I had kind of just like resigned myself to being like, hey, this, I might not ever get this
mm,
version of you. And now it's here.
mm,
And now when we have, the inevitable sort of slip back into old patterns, it's like
Sure.
this fear comes where she's like, "Oh my gosh, like I lost you again, and I'm
Mm.
going to lose you forever." And I'm going to use that now and be like, honey, I took the red pill. I can't unsee this. Like
Mhm.
I might I might have a misstep here or there. I might,
Yeah.
you know, get fatigued, tired, overwhelmed, and fall back into some old patterns. But like, this is not something that is going to go away. Like, it
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah, yeah.
And it doesn't mean it's not going to require work, but I saw the I saw the Tesla, and now
Yeah.
it's everywhere, and it's
Yeah.
I can't unsee it.
Yeah.
And then
So
the other
yeah.
part was
Yeah.
the last part that I thought was this whole idea of around seasonality of life, and I've coached so much about it, but like being able to experience like, oh my gosh, like I'm in a new season. I've held on to what I loved about the last season for
Mm.
far too long, and those are gone.
Yeah.
Like that is gone. Like
Yeah.
life without kids is gone.
Oh, yeah.
Life without, a complex business and it's just behind me. It's gone.
Mhm.
And to like feel like, oh, I'm trying to anchor in those old ways and those old feelings that I liked, and then seeing they're gone
Mm.
is what is like feeding resentment and anger. And it's like, okay, just we have to we have in the new context of today, what do I, where do I take these
Mhm.
stories and how do I work with them and how do I
Yeah.
establish the next great, benchmark or, raise the bar in
Yeah.
life to now say, oh, well, I don't actually ever want to go back to that because this is so great. And I
Yeah.
worked hard to make today great. And then
Yeah.
in 3 to 5 years, it might be completely different,
Yeah. Yeah, and that seasonality too is, as I'm thinking of wrapping up here and thinking that conscious of the time, is that, this practice of acceptance of, it's this term of, radical acceptance, and it's accepting really is an acknowledgement of where you currently are, whether you like it or not, whether you want it or not, whether you approve of it or not. It's more of, this is just current reality as it is, and I could fight and resist reality and want this past stuff or whatever, and that's going to create more resistance, more suffering. Or I could say, hey, it is what it is, and here's how far I've come. Maybe here's the progress I've come. Here's the progress I've made, and I want to keep growing. So it's not this black and white that like, hey, I'm screwed and I'm stuck, or I have to just succeed, and if I don't, it's like, no, it's like we look at both. It's like, here's where I am, here's how the wins I've done, and the growth, and maybe where I'm stuck, and what I want to keep doing. So it's kind of this acceptance of both aspects of life, and not just so in the extremes or on the pendulums, because we tend to be very pendulum-y type people, right? On the extremes of like, it's either this or it's this, it's this or it's this,
Yeah.
when really most of life is two opposing truths are true at the same time. Like, I'm doing the best I can, and I want to improve more, right? It's we need to accept these both realities and
Mhm.
not fight them. And when we do accept it, actually it lessens resistance and anxiety and stress, and enables us to actually do something about it. So I, appreciate everything you've shared so far, but two important questions. One, and this is a major pivot, but something I've been asking lately is, what's the current music you're listening to, or what inspires you, or, what do you kind of have on repeat right now?
Um, I love that. Okay, it's just well, two things. My kids, they are in the Taylor Swift,
Ah,
like they're Swifties through and through. So lots of Taylor Swift. It also turns out that my training partner and media producer for my company likes him some Taylor Swift as well. So we knock that out. We play that loud on the speaker when we train.
hmm,
And then my wife, about a year, and she's a vocalist, and so she's often, learning new songs and prepping for shows, and so
hmm.
whatever's like her set list, that's what we're listening to because she's always like getting her lyrics down, and so
Okay,
they're like a cover band. They play some
nice.
some classics, and
Oh,
so that's
awesome.
been fun. I'll hear a song and I'm like,
You're
oh, yeah,
going
this
with
is
it.
this
Yeah,
is my wife's song. But
nice. That's
yeah,
so cool.
I don't have any personal like, this is what I really want to listen to. I'm like, I'm just listening to what the people
Yeah.
around me are into.
No, that's cool. Hey, you Swifty, and then cover band stuff. It's a fun question, because I think, I don't know. I'm always intrigued, 'cause I love music, and it's always interesting what season, what people are listening to, what motivates them, and we move through seasons too with music, and music is so
Yeah.
powerful. And with kids, my kids are not getting the Swift yet, Swifty yet. They're not there yet. My daughter's in she's in the Frozen stage at 2 right now, so a lot of Let It Go
Yeah,
or Into the
sure.
Unknown, and my boys are, they like a bunch of other stuff like My one son is into like a soundtrack from a video game that's like it's very like violin orchestral, so he just kind of like loses himself quietly in that. And so
Oh,
anyways,
that's wild.
it's really fun. And then last but not least, where if people want to reach out to you, if they want to work with you, if they want to see what you're doing, where can we find you? Where can they get access?
Sure, yeah. Yeah, Marcus Philly on all the social media platforms, Instagram, kind of the main one that we use,
Hmm.
and then and YouTube. And then you can go to my website, functional-bodybuilding.com, and you can get a ton of free resources there on like how we train people physically, we move, our nutritional strategies and approaches. There's a ton of free value that's there if you want. And yeah, also there's paid programs and things like that if you're looking to align yourself to a movement practice, and that combines all of the things that I've learned for the last 25 years doing this.
Nice. And everyone listening or watching, this will all the links for Marcus's content and all his resources will be in the description below. They'll be clickable, hyperlink. You click them, find them. And if you, of course, want to work with him, please reach out. If not, Marcus, I appreciate your time and just showing up and being yourself. And it really enjoyed it. And we could probably talk for hours more, but I don't want to make it so people's attentions are gone because at this point
Yeah,
we're on the hour mark. So, but we'll have to
cool.
have you on again. But dude, blessings to you and all the work you're doing, and thanks
Yeah,
again.
thanks, Travis.